speaking of action, there is an immediate action that is necessary because of a vote that is coming up tomorrow. Or actually, I don't know if it's a vote or what it is tomorrow, but I do know that over the course of the last 48, 72, 96 hours, I've been talking to some individuals about HB 78. One of which is Marcel Sturbich, who is an election integrity advocate, and we've had him on many, many times. Another is Gary Click, who is one of the Republicans who has joined with 6 Democrats. There's 3 Republicans and 6 Democrats in trying to advance a digital ID bill, which is HB 78. Blows my mind, and I'll tell you what he had to say about that. And the third is former Senate candidate and the leader of GFI, the Grassroots Freedom Initiative, Mark Pukita. And Mark has released a couple of videos explaining exactly why HB 78 is so dangerous and why we, as Ohio voters and residents, need to reach out to our legislators right now. Mark Pukita joins us on AM 1420 The Answer. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay. Thanks very much. So I've been given kind of a crash course on what this bill does over the last couple of days, as I mentioned. You and I watched your video, and I read a very lengthy breakdown of this in an email from Marcel Sturbich. So let's give the uninitiated the base version of this first, and then we'll get into the details. Tell us what HB 78 is and does.
Okay, so what HB 78 does is change Ohio Revised Code to allow the definition of like personal ID or state ID, and I forget the exact terminology, but to allow for digital driver's licenses. So you could put them in your Google Wallet or Apple Wallet or whatever you use, and you could use that as it's a approved state ID for any purposes having to do with services in Ohio. And it's about I want to say a 12-page bill, but it depends on what reader you use to read it, 12 pages. Mm-hmm. And it's up on the state legislature website, and folks can go take a look at it.
Okay. Immediate response is, what's wrong with that? A lot of us, have our credit cards on our cell phone in our digital wallet, like you said, the Apple Wallet or whatever, and it's a lot easier, and our discount cards and everything else. So, if it saves us from having to carry the ID with us and we get a picture of it basically on digital format, what's wrong with that? That's what they're going to say. What do you say?
Right. And that's a good question if you just looked at it at the high level like that. But so first of all, your ID not only impacts you, but it impacts other people in terms of the services you can use from the state, as well as things like using it for voting. And I know we're going to get to that topic. Mm-hmm. If something gets compromised with your wallet, with your credit cards or your insurance cards or whatever, it impacts you. It doesn't impact everybody else in the state. So that's the first thing. The second aspect of this is the biometric capture. So if you read through the bill, it even talks about selfies and being able to use selfies to apply for one of these. And that's biometric data. What do I mean by that? It's things like selfies to be used for facial recognition, right? Retina scanning, things of that nature. And the problem here is this bill is just like it's actually like a summary of a bill. The actual bill that would be required to protect Ohioans would probably be hundreds of pages long, Bob. And you and I both know that when you take a complex situation and you just throw something spaghetti at the wall to get a bill through which your name is on as a sponsor, co-sponsor, then the administrative state kicks in and starts interpreting that, right? We've seen it numerous times before. And then as well, there are nefarious characters in terms of election integrity that would love to see a digital ID used for voting ID. And while everybody will tell you, well, we're going to amend this thing to protect from that, It doesn't work that easily because there is this Democrat constitutional amendment coming up, a ballot issue. And if it were to pass as a constitutional amendment, it would trump Ohio Revised Code. And so you have the ID in place. It's in Ohio Revised Code. Then the constitutional amendment comes along and says, we would like to use digital IDs. That's going to trump that Ohio Revised Code prohibition of using those IDs for voting. And then the people that want them, mostly Democrats, would say, and the Republicans can't complain about digital ID because they were the ones that were sponsors and co-sponsors of this legislation. This is being rushed. It is going too fast. It needs to be pulled back, and actually it needs to be completely rewritten.
Okay, so completely rewritten. We're talking to Mark Pukita with the Grassroots Freedom Initiative. Mark, how can people follow? I know you've got a newsletter and you've got a texting campaign and social media for GFI. Give that out.
The easiest thing for people to do is to text GFI, the letters G, F, and I, to 66866, and then follow the prompts. That will get them automatically into our email system, and then we'll email them and tell them what they need to do to get signed up for our text alerts.
Give that short code again.
It's GFI, text GFI to 66866. 66866.
That's what I wanted, is that short code, because that's the important part of this. GFI to that number to get it. Okay. So, let's talk about the election aspect of this first. How does this improve or strengthen Ohio's election integrity? Because that's what they're arguing that it will do. You, and I read a very lengthy message from Marcel Sturbich on this, say it absolutely does not do that. Tell me what it does, and then tell me how the Secretary of State feels about this.
So for this I don't know how, first of all, I'll say I don't know what the Secretary of State feels about it, but the fact that he hasn't come out or his staff haven't come out absolutely against this is probably gives you the answer. But in terms of election integrity, I don't know how they could say that this would improve election integrity. Because as this bill is written, as I understand it, this function of validating and verifying these IDs would be outsourced to third party. And just like election systems being outsourced to third parties, there's no ability to go after public records or public information requests of these companies that would be doing this. So imagine this. You need to provide a copy of a photo ID to get an absentee ballot in the future, right? I don't know if Ohioans know this right now, but you can vote an absentee ballot with no ID. You can request it, you can vote it, and you can have it counted without showing an ID. While those of us who go vote in person must present an ID. So let's say the legislation was changed to require a copy of an ID to get an absentee ballot. If you are able to hack or compromise those systems, you could print out thousands and thousands of copies of someone's digital ID in hours. I mean, it is clear to me that the people sponsoring this bill have not thought it through, don't understand the ramifications, or don't care. I would love to hear what Gary Click had to say about how this will strengthen election integrity. It just doesn't make sense on its face, but I'd love to hear it.
Well, I'll give you some of that, because nothing that Gary and I texted one another back and forth with last night was off the record. But the summary I would give you is he didn't know everything it does. And he signed on to it perhaps a little bit hastily, and is actually concerned about his ability to perhaps withdraw his name. because I actually told him, I said, Gary, you got to get your name off this. This is a terrible piece of legislation for many of the reasons you just laid out, Mark, and many that Marcel, I even shared that with him. And I said, this is what it does. And I said, you got to get off of this thing. And his, one of his responses was, since I'm not on that committee, it would have to be a floor vote, and it won't get a floor vote unless it will pass. So there's no mechanism for me to remove my name unless it passes. And I didn't know this. I said, you can't unsponsor a bill you've sponsored. And he basically said, there's only a couple of ways to do it. A co-sponsor request goes out before a bill is dropped. It is, offered general and does not always have the language with it. And if you say yes, the sponsor's turning your name when they drop the bill. If and only if you are in the committee hearing the bill, you can add or remove your name. And he's not on that committee, so he can't do it within. He can only do it at the time of an actual full House floor vote. He said that's the process. But he basically said, HB 78 is certainly not a bill I'm highly vested in, and definitely not the hill I'm willing to die on. I appreciate the feedback and the information here. Makes sense. I had not thought of a lot of the arguments that you presented here. So, Mark, it looks like he is, certainly somebody who is swayable on this. And since he is one of the co-sponsors, I have asked him, and he hasn't responded to this part yet, to at least issue a statement. Since he can't remove his name as a sponsor, issue a statement saying he does not support this bill, so we can perhaps, make a little bit of movement on that regard. So that's what he had to say.
Well, kudos to Representative Click for being willing to look at the data and the information that's been presented and consider changing his mind, because there are a lot of people, I give Gary a lot of credit for that, because there are a lot of people in our legislature who wouldn't do that because their pride would not allow them to do that. So good for Gary.
Yeah, I agree. And he was appreciative of me for reaching out to him before coming on the air and just going after him. And so I'm on the air talking about him now. Good. But in the way that I agree with you, it is that's what a good legislator does. That's what a smart person does, regardless of whether you're a legislator or not. We talk about this all the time. When the situation and the circumstances and the facts of a situation change, a wise person will indeed be willing to change his opinion based on that new information. If nothing changes and you have set your opinion, fine. But if new facts are available and it doesn't make you consider those facts, you're not being very, very wise. And, so this is what I expect somebody would do. And I'm going to try to reach out to Josh Williams next with the same messaging and see what he has to say. I have those guys on a fairly regular basis, so I can reach them. I have never talked to Thomas Hall, so I don't know where we go from there. But Mark, I want to get back into some of the nitty gritty of this first, but tell me about tomorrow. Tomorrow there's proponent testimony, I think?
Yeah, as I understand it, there's proponent testimony tomorrow, but it's not only proponent testimony. We're hearing that it's testimony. That, and I'm not sure this is absolutely correct, because we can't seem to get a clear answer, and it may be because we're asking the wrong question, so it could be on us. But as we understand it, they're going to combine proponent testimony with I forget what it was called, interested party or something like that. They didn't call it proponent and opponent. It was just, it just seemed odd. It's not the typical process. Now, maybe we misunderstood something.
Well, I've got another mailer on this that I'll bring to your attention. Are you familiar at all with Building Blocks for Liberty, Mark?
I am.
I got an email from them. I must be on their list, and I don't even know if I knew it. But it says proponent testimony. It says we need to educate and activate Ohio's electorate to oppose HB 78 in advance of Tuesday, 3/11's proponent testimony at 10 a.m. So they're saying proponent testimony. So whether that's all testimony or just proponent or not, that I don't know. I mean that's something they sent out. So I assume they would have researched that and gotten the confirmation of that. But what else they said?
I understand that someone sent their testimony in that was opponent testimony, and they're going to be allowed to present it, I believe. So
on the same day.
That's why we're confused.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to get to how people can. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm glad the Building Blocks for Liberty people are on this as well. We don't work with them, but yeah, good.
And they also give a little bit of info. The reason I asked you if you knew anything about the Secretary of State, because as I'm reading this, and I've only skimmed it this morning before we came on together, They advise people to reference the bullet points listed below and review the background paper from the Ohio Legislative Services Commission and so on and so forth. And then it says the impending Ohio Voter Bill of Rights, a constitutional amendment that will be presented by the Democrats, you were talking about this, presents an urgent challenge to the election integrity that Ohioans have diligently fought to uphold. HB 78 assists in paving the way for that to be implemented. Frank LaRose, Ohio Secretary of State, has called the proposed amendment a political Trojan horse and contends it would enable non-citizens to vote. He has also said it would undercut and roll back Ohio's popular photo ID requirement, degrading the integrity of our process. End quote. So as I'm reading that, it sounds like the Secretary is on our side of this, right?
You'd have to ask him that, Bob. I don't, you know how this goes.
Just based on the building blocks messaging there, that it's saying that the Secretary of State is calling the Ohio Voter Bill of Rights a political Trojan horse, and that since it says HB 78 is paving the way for that to be implemented, it sounds to me like he's opposed to it. Now, Seth just whispered in my ear, we have Secretary LaRose coming on Wednesday, did you say, Seth? Okay, so I'll ask him directly on Wednesday, so that is good news. I'm trying to figure out who the allies are here, Mark. That's my point in asking, can we count on the Secretary of State? Obviously you, Marcel, Building Blocks, what other organizations there are, because we need people to unify in a very short period of time here to get testimony in.
Yeah, that chain of logic about the Secretary of State makes sense to me. Whether or not he'll come out and vigorously oppose something that's going on in the legislature, you'll have to ask him about that, because those kind of things get very, very touchy at times. So
yes,
I'm glad he's coming on, and I'm glad Ohioans will get to hear from him about this, because this is a calamity. This is not good.
No, it is not, and. I just wanted to kind of point out again, I don't know when opponent testimony will be heard. If it's tomorrow, like we were just discussing, or maybe they're going to allow some tomorrow, but there's still going to be a separate opponent testimony day, and then maybe then some proponents will be allowed to go. I don't know what they're doing here, but you want to contact your legislators who are the sponsors of this. And Building Blocks gives all of their info, and I'm not going to read them all here because you can find their phone numbers and their email addresses on the State House website. But just know their names. The three Republicans, as I said, are Thomas Hall, Gary Click, who looks like he's on the verge of maybe making a statement saying, I no longer support this, even though I can't remove my name from it, and Josh Williams. And then the Democrats, well, they're Democrats, but Thad Claggett, Heidi Workman, Steve Dimitri, I'm sorry. This is the committee. Beg your pardon. This is the Tech and Innovation Committee, not the co-sponsors. Sorry, but these are the people we would need to vote this thing down in committee: Thad Claggett, Heidi Workman, Steve Dimitri, Ron Ferguson, Adam Holmes, Adam Matthews, Ty D. Matthews, Reardon McLean, and Melanie Miller. So these are the individuals on that committee that we need to contact. Find their emails and information and the phone numbers on the State House website. They're obviously easily available for everybody, but we have to tell them to get this thing killed in committee so it never even gets to a floor vote. That's I guess the message we want to give here, right?
Yeah. If folks want to go to my personal X account, it's just MPUKITA. I believe I've got a pinned post that is a copy of the email we sent out. It's a web version of the email we sent out electronically yesterday that's got all the email addresses and phone numbers for all of those people on it. Good.
That's good to know that that's there. And then also I would tell people to go to your X account to watch your video too, because you kind of clarified this in a pretty short video, of exactly what HB 78 does and how dangerous it is. We're trying to go in a little more depth on this, but it's a very, very, nice summary of why we have to do this that you have put out there too. So just M. Pukita, right?
M. Pukita, MPUKITA.
And, GFI has a Twitter feed as well?
We do. GFI Ohio at GFIOHIO.
GFI Ohio, which is Grassroots Freedom Initiative that Mark runs, which is an important organization. And I'll hit that too real quick for you. If you would like to receive messaging and get your email list and email in the database to receive messaging from GFI, text the letters GFI to 66866. 66866. All right, Mark, that'll cover it for today. That's a ton of information, but I appreciate you coming on. You and Marcel and some other people are doing building blocks. Are doing some really good work here to try to make people know how dangerous this is on a variety of fronts, from voting to surveillance and more. So we'll follow it, see what happens tomorrow with the testimony phase, and obviously we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Mark. There's Mark Pokita. HB 78 should die. It should die in committee, and that committee that I just read you the names of, you should reach out to them to tell them that's what you want to have happen. The problem for me is my newsletter doesn't come out till Saturday, so it's an action item that is definitely a to-do that won't be able to be done by tomorrow, but we'll see where it goes, and we'll give you proper guidance on what to do after that in Saturday's Strictly Speaking this week.